Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz to a realistic map of meaning. We've been going through for a few weeks now the laws of charity. Lots to learn for sure. More to put in practice for sure. And I think we're winding up the laws of charity tonight, and I look forward to hearing what Rabbi Schwartz may want to do next. So let's jump right in and see how the rabbi's doing. Shalom, Rabbi Schwartz. We're going to turn the class over to you. So good to be with you again. Nice to see you smiling. And I want to thank you for these laws of charity. It turned out to be so much more than I expected, for sure.
Good. Well, I expected to. I sometimes, some of these things I did a while back, and I come to it. I say, wow, look how deep it is. Not one that I did, what Rambam did, and so on. Okay, I'm showing the screen now. We got up on your screen. You should have chapter 10, and let's just get here. Where was it? Where was that? I have a see. There it is. Okay. So here's our marker. So last time we got up to the source for this Rambam, which was 18. Man shall express himself and endure pain, not to require charity, and the great sages took on the most menial tasks in order to not have to rely on the community. And so let's take a look at Talmud Pesachim. Pesachim is the tractate that deals with the holiday of Pesach, of Passover, and there's charity figures in there. So we have Tana de Be'elio, Tat, that was the teach school of Elio. Though Rabbi Akiva said, treat your Sabbath like a weekday rather than be dependent on men, yet one must prepare something trifling at home. What is it? Said Rabbi Papa, fish hash. It's a very cheap dish. As we learned, Rabbi Yehuda ben Thomas said, be strong as the leopard and swift as the eagle, fleet as the deer, and valiant as a lion, to do the will of thy Father in heaven. Thus, even the poorest must make an effort to honor the Sabbath, and that's a Sensino note. Where's the beginning of that paragraph? Maybe over here. I don't have the Sensino anymore, so I can't validate exactly what it was. But so Rabbi Akiva said, better treat your Sabbath like a weekday. In other words, don't make anything special if rather than go and ask for charity. But I say, even though he said that, you have to have something. There's always something you can do to make Sabbath special. So the Shulchan Aruch treated this as follows: always a man should distance himself from charity. He should even endure pain in order not to require the assistance of others. And so the sages have commanded, better to make your Sabbath as a weekday rather than to require assistance from others. Even if he was a sage, highly honored, and then becomes impoverished, he should work at some trade, even a contemptible one, and not seek assistance from others. And that is the second last paragraph. Paragraph 19. Whoever does not need to take, yet deceives people and takes, shall not die of old age before he must of necessity require assistance from others. Moreover, he is in the category of cursed is the man who trusts in men. Whoever requires to take and cannot continue living unless he takes, such as an elderly or sick person, or one who is afflicted, and nevertheless bloats his mind, his pride, and does not take, he is a spiller of blood, and is responsible for his life, and there is nothing in his pain but sins and blasphemies. So he's contrasting two kinds of guys. The first guy, he really didn't need to take. He deceives people into giving him. Yeah. So before he dies, he'll wind up absolutely having to rely on someone. He's going to lose everything and make it real for himself. Whereas on the other hand, somebody who requires to take and really can't continue living unless he does, and doesn't still, he's a spiller of blood. He's responsible for his life. And there's nothing in his pain, all the pain he endured, is of no use. Sins and blasphemies, that's what it amounts to. But whoever needs to take and pains and presses himself through time and lives a life of pain so that he need not trouble himself upon the community shall not die from old age until he has been able to provide for others from that which is his own. On him and all like him it is written, blessed is the man who trusts in God. So that's his, I think his last statement on this subject. That try not to take, but if you need to, take it. Don't be a fool. Huh? That's paragraph 19. That's Rumbo. I should split it up. I should split this up and show that this is one guy, and then this is the third kind of guy. Peah. Peah was the section dealing with the corner of the field that you have to leave over for the poor. So it's not surprising to find information about tzedakah there. If a man possesses 50 zuz and he uses them for his business, he must not take the poor gifts. Whoever does not need to take charity and yet takes will not depart from this world before being actually in need of his fellow men. But he who needs to take and does not take will not die before he will come in old age to support others from his own bounty. Concerning him, the verse says, blessed be the man who trusts in the Lord and whose hope is the Lord. That's a verse from Samuel 4:4. The same may be applied to a judge. I'll just start a new paragraph here. The same may be applied to a judge who judges in truth according to its integrity. And if a man is not lame, blind, or halting, and he feigns to be as one of these, he will not die in his old age before he actually becomes as one of these. As it is said, he who searches for evil, it shall come unto him. Proverbs 11:27. And also as it is said, righteousness shall thou surely pursue. So spell that. Deuteronomy 16:20. And any judge who accepts a bribe or who perverts justice will not die in old age before his eyes have become dim, as it is said, and a gift shalt thou not accept, for a gift blinds them that have sight. So to this, Shulchan Aruch said, whoever does not need to take and deceives the people and takes, shall not die before he requires assistance from others. Whoever requires to take and cannot continue living unless he takes, such as an elderly or sick person, or one who is afflicted and is of unsound mind, but does not take, is a spiller of blood, and is responsible for his life, and there is nothing in his pain but sins and blasphemies. However, whoever needs to take and pains and presses himself through time and lives a life of pain, so that he need not trouble himself upon the community, shall not die until he has been able to provide for others. On him and all like him, it is written, blessed is the man who trusts in God. Pretty much the words of the Rambam. And I guess on that I had nothing to say. So that's the end of the laws of charity. I think of myself now, I noticed that Rambam inserted on his own this case of whoever requires taking and doesn't take. He really should, but he doesn't. He's responsible for his own life. That was not in the Mishnah Peah. He said, if you have 50 zuz and you shouldn't take, and if you do take, you're going to wind up being actually poor. But on the other hand, if you didn't need to take, but he who needs to take and does not take, in other words, you pain yourself to get by without, he'll eventually have his own money to give to others. And then he goes on to a judgment. Never gave the middle case of somebody who really should have taken and foolishly didn't, and caused himself to become worse. Then he's responsible for his own troubles.
Yeah, I found that amazing. He called it bloodshed. People need to look at it for what it really is. I mean, if you're causing yourself harm uh, from arrogance so that you won't take any charity and to the point of death, I mean, that is, yeah, beyond
Yeah.
unhealthy. It's almost mental, isn't it?
So the first guy he's describing is a guy that's faking, and the last guy is a guy that's trying his best and he's able to do it. And the middle guy is a guy that tried too much. He wasn't, realistic. And you have to be realistic. And he's always insisting that you be realistic. But within the realism, there is sometimes you can go without. I remember um, I remember my rabbi, the rabbi that trained me. He had 5 children and one daughter. When she came to get married, I think I just heard this like from off the side, but it struck me. I've never forgot it. I heard that she was concerned that her husband, the guy that she decided she wanted to marry, this is who she likes, this is who's she gets along with, and so on. But he had no plans for a bit. He wanted to sit and learn. He was going to be, he had no prospects for any kind of prosperity. Let's put it that way. And so she said to her father, "What should I do?" Like So he said, "So you'll be poor. You'll be poor. So what? So you can be poor." Just okay, yeah, they're poor people. You can live as a poor person. You're not going to die. You just won't have what other guys have. You'll just have to put up with less. Um, he was ready to. In the end, they became quite prosperous. Not, I don't know, prosperous, but he became quite a leader of men and a rabbi in his community, and the two of them, run a whole city. Very accomplished people. But I just remember that when they were young, it's a little scary. But they did what they had to do, and it worked out. And I guess that's what the Rambam is saying here. When you try to do what you can do, in the end, you'll have.
Yeah, I
So
really like the way he summed it up for sure. I think it brings into balance all the giving it adds purpose of life to it for sure.
that's the whole thing. Now,
But if
that's a very good
if you've
segue.
noticed, some of my questions or comments have always been about the takers, and I
Yeah,
think it balances a lot of that out. Those that take and don't really need, and yeah, they're gonna reap what they sow for sure. And Ronald, since rabbis are finished up on the laws of charity, have you got any questions?
No, I was just going to make a comment on what we've just been discussed. In throughout the nations in this day and age, if that situation, people would say, "Oh, walk away." If you're going to have to live poor, walk away and find someone that's got more income. They
yeah,
wouldn't turn around and say you can live poor. They'd say,
yeah.
"Oh,
Right,
forbid."
right,
No, go find someone else.
right, right, right. So he was very happy with the with the prospective son-in-law, but he was very very conscientious of his daughter, and like I say, it worked out.
Yeah.
Um, and okay, so that now I repeat again. Um, if I wrote this today, I wouldn't write it this way. Um, Maybe one day I'll get the time to go back and update the English. Like my notes were a little too formal. I wouldn't write the English like that. And then this Encino Talmud was also formal. Maybe that's what influenced me. I noticed today they have another translation that fills in more of the gaps of the Talmud in Sepharia. So I would probably use that today. But having said that, anybody that wants a copy of this, it's Google Sheets text, and it's easy enough for me to just create a PDF and send them an email. So anybody that wants these texts and email, I'd be glad to send them to you. You just have to give me your email address.
Or
Now,
they can email you at sbs447.
at gmail.com.
There you go,
That's
folks.
Sam Bob
sbs447 at
Right, Sam Bob
gmail.com.
Sam 447. 3 letters, 3 numbers. And that's all. I get your email, and be my pleasure. Now, What I want to introduce to you is what I propose to do next. I was working on a little tonight, so let me bring it out over here. And this is the introduction. So it's a good thing to read tonight to see how it appeals. So I'll just start reading it. I call this book the Shulchan Baruch, Table of Blessings. Although I think in my email I mentioned a different phrase I'd like to visit. This is an earlier phrase. I meant to check what was the email I sent it. Yeah. Order your blessings. Order your blessings. Yeah. I think that might be a better. No, where was I here? Order your blessings. Yeah. You tell me which one is the. See how I get in this title. Okay, because it rhymes with Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Baruch rhymes with Shulchan Aruch, which is table prepared, and because it follows its format. The Shulchan Aruch format became a favorite for describing post-temple Jewish behavior, as evident from the many books having the same name, such as Tur Shulchan Aruch, Rab Shulchan Aruch, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and Aruch HaShulchan, to name the most famous. Actually, the format originated in the Tur Shulchan Aruch, which wasn't called Shulchan Aruch at all. The original name was Arba Turim, which means 4 rows, alluding to the 4 rows of precious stones on the breastplate worn by the high priest. These 4 rows were sources of divine enlightenment because in temple times, a question could be posed to them, the precious stones, and they would answer by lighting up in a coded sequence, a precursor to computer screens. In the case of Arbiturim, the 4 rows refer to 4 volumes, each clarifying a different category of Jewish behavior. This work was written by Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher around the year 1300 and became a classic guide to Jewish behavior. About 250 years later, Rabbi Yosef Karo updated this work by dividing each chapter into numbered paragraphs, omitting a lot of quoted source material, and adding more scenarios that required guidance. He named this update Shulchan Aruch, and it became the new favorite guidance text for his Sephardic, which is the Mediterranean community. So famous was it that when Rav Moshe Isserlis decided to provide a similar guide for his Ashkenazi European community, who had different practices on some issues, he simply inserted his rulings in brackets as another option to consider. Thus, Shulchan Aruch came to be authored by 2 authorities, Rabbi Yosef Karo for the Sephardic community and Rabbi Moshe Isserlis for the Ashkenazi community. Thereafter, the original Arbitorium evolved into a scholarly source book rather than the go-to guidebook it had been, and eventually became known colloquially as Tur Shulchan Aruch. About 200 years later, the first Lubavitch Rebbe, Rabbi Shlomo Shneir Zalman Oviadi, rewrote the Shulchan Aruch, inserting decisions of his own to guide his followers. This version got named Rav Shulchan Aruch. About 100 years later, several other versions were printed, including Kitzur Shulchan Aruch and Aruch HaShulchan. All these works continued using the order of topics originated by Arbitorium and standardized by Shulchan Aruch. The above describes how the Shulchan Aruch format became a new curriculum for studying the accepted practices of Jewish behavior, that is, the oral Torah. It was not the first time the curriculum had changed. Originally, the only text was the 5 books of Torah that Moshe gave us around 1300 BCE, before the Common Era. Concurrently, he gave us the oral Torah, a wealth of explanations that added to the text such information as the 39 labors forbidden on Shabbos, the requirements for proper animal slaughter, the limits of excessive profit, and so on, and so on and on. We were forbidden from converting this information into published text, as despite its voluminous nature, we were still forbidden from converting this information into published text. So each student would have to find an established scholar to teach and guide his development. The prophets added new text after Moshe, describing the historical development of national Jewish behavior, but did not try to convert the oral information into text. All this unwritten information remained oral for about 1,500 years until the writing of Mishnah by the great sage Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who determined that his troubled times demanded it, lest the information be forgotten. Now, before the composition of Mishnah, in what order was the oral Torah learned? Presumably, it was learned in the order of the Chumash text, which is the text that Moshe gave us, because a teacher has to start somewhere, and the easiest place to start is with the text. Thus, the Chumash, that's the 5 books of Moshe, was the curriculum, the order and anchor of further study via discussions of the oral teachings. Today, we can read a remnant of these teachings preserved in the Midrashic literature. When Rabbi Yehuda Nasi composed the Mishnah, he introduced a sea change by inventing a whole new curriculum for studying the oral Torah. He organized 63 fields of study, called tractates, and gathered them into 6 groups called orders. The actual text he wrote was brief, using allusions to the many details and interconnections among fields of study, so as to preserve as much as possible the need for a live teacher of the information. This new curriculum became so accepted that it was copied by generations of scholars for 1,000 years. Whoever wished to write out the oral Torah in greater detail, as they did a few hundred years later with the Talmud, essentially expanded the Mishnah curriculum by adding their commentaries to it. I should add, but they kept that order. Rambam, Maimonides, was the first to introduce a new curriculum that reordered all the oral information transcribed to date. He titled it Mishnah Torah, repetition of the Torah, and subtitled it Yad Chazaka, which means a strong hand. Its title, Repetition of the Torah, was meant to give it authority insofar as the same title had been traditionally applied to the last book of Chumash, Devarim, Deuteronomy, which repeats a lot of the information contained in the first 4 books. Its subtitle, A Strong Hand, was meant to describe the advantage it gives with its firm opinion on proper practices. This stood in stark contrast to the Talmud's presentation of different opinions and scholarly arguments on each issue. The name Yad Chazaka, a strong hand, also alludes to its subdivision into 14 books. The Hebrew number 14 is represented by letters that spell the word Yad, hand, a strong hand. I think the following 2 paragraphs that I extracted from Wikipedia present a fair description. Maimonides' new curriculum provided a complete summary of the oral Torah, so that a person who mastered first the written Torah and then the Mishnah Torah would not need any other book to decide Jewish behavior in any circumstance. The contemporary reaction was mixed, with strong and immediate opposition focusing on the absence of sources and the belief that the work appeared to be intended to supersede the study of the Talmud. Nevertheless, the idea of a curriculum order different from the Talmud's took hold. Maimonides responded to these criticisms, and the Mishnah Torah endures as an influential work in Jewish religious thought. According to several authorities, a decision may not be rendered in opposition to a view of Maimonides, even where he apparently militated against the sense of a Talmudic passage. For in such cases, the presumption was that the words of the Talmud were incorrectly interpreted. Likewise, one must follow Maimonides even when the latter opposed his teachers, since he surely knew their views, and if he decided against them, he must have disapproved of their interpretation. So he was the master. I was going to reorder this a bit to say that, so subsequent to him, he wrote in the year about 1200 of our era, and as I said earlier, the Tur Shulchan Aruch, the original template for the Shulchan Aruch, was written about what did I say, about 1300. 1300. So about 100 years after Rambam. Um, and so again, so it's all these curriculum changes. The first curriculums lasted for a long time because that was the way it was given through Moshe. That's like very holy stuff. But history unfolded, and then they had to do something to preserve. And they decided once they got new curriculum, so then that was an open game. And the big difference between Rambam's curriculum and the Shulchan Aruch's curriculum is that Rambam came at it addressing it in a logical fashion for the whole Torah. He starts with the basics of the religion, and then goes on to the behaving like God and really just the religious stuff, and then he goes on to the holy days, Shabbos, and all the holidays, the festives, and then goes on to issues of marriage and so on. He's got 14 parts there, whereas the Shulchan Aruch and also Rambam included everything, including building a temple and all the temple sacrifices and everything, because he wanted to present the entire Torah so you would know Mashiach could come any day and we'd have the rulings, etc. But 100 years later, Shulchan Aruch said, if people need something practical, they look up for their everyday life. And so he just wrote from the time you get up in the morning to how the day progresses, and it went like that. And so that became more familiar to the layman, and that's what it was. So it's that template that I want to follow. And we have 4 minutes, and I'll give you just a taste of how it starts as the day dawns. So essay is Shulchan Aruch, that's Rabbi Yosef Cairo. He's the author. And Ramah is Rabbi Moshe Isserlis. He's the guy that wrote for the European community. So he starts off, one should strengthen himself like a lion to get up in the morning to serve his creator, so that it is he who awakens the dawn. Early, type A guy. Ramah says, at least one should not delay beyond the time when the congregation prays. And he got that from the Torah. And then he goes on, he starts another paragraph, and says, I have set the Lord before me constantly, from Psalms. This is a major principle in the Torah, and amongst the virtues of the righteous who walk before God. For a person's way of sitting, his movements, and his dealings while he is alone in his house are not like his way of sitting, his movements, and his dealings when he is before a great king, nor his speech and free expression as much as he wants when he is with his household members and his relatives, like his speech when he is in a royal audience. All the more so when one takes to heart that the great king, the Holy One, blessed he, whose glory fills the earth, is standing over him and watching his actions, as it is stated, when the man hide in concealment and I will not see him, the word of God, verse in Jeremiah, he immediately acquires fear and submission in dread of God, may he be blessed, and is ashamed of him constantly, as the Guide for the Perplexed, which is written by Rambam. And one should not be ashamed because of people who mock him in the service of God, and should also go about modestly. And when he lies in his bed, he should know before whom he lies, and as soon as he wakes up from sleep, he should rise eagerly to the service of his Creator. May he be blessed and exalted. Quote from the Torah. So on this I say, notice a striking difference in the mindset of the reader presumed by the two writers. The author, first guy, advocates leaping out of bed to seize the day, awaken the dawn as if you were the creator. Embrace your potential of being in God's image. Ramah, however, assumes a not so energized reader. At least don't come late to minyan, which is the congregational prayer. It goes on to caution a low profile, always mindful of God's august presence. So in either case, the blessing is to wake up with purpose, to remember there's a job to be done. So whether you're the kind of guy that likes to spring out of bed or you'd rather stay in there, have this in mind when you wake up. And that's the blessing of the first part. And with that, I yield the floor.
Well, that sounds like it's going to be very interesting, the order of blessings. And I think this is something so useful for every B'nai Noach in the sense that people want to know how to walk, how to practice, how to live. And I think we're going to get some wonderful answers and the sources where they come from. So, yeah, Toda, Rabbi, I'm looking forward to hearing more. Ronald, have you got anything you want to comment on so far?
I'm excited about this.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it's definitely useful material that I'm sure will be practically applied, and for sure. So we look forward to more of that. So will we be continuing on Wednesday?
Wednesday. Wednesday is the next session.
All right, so that's Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We will be back on Wednesday for more Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz. And I wanted to thank you again so much for sharing the laws of charity. They were just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful material.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So till Wednesday, folks, have a wonderful